Hey everyone! In this video, I want to show you something that we've been working on for a little bit now and will be released in Cortex 1.5 in the next couple weeks. Um, it, the actual release date really depends on when we finish the tent pole features for 1.5. This is the second of three major features that we're going to have in 1.5. We've already done a video on the user management aspect so that you can update the security groups and the users that have access to Cortex. If someone joins or leaves your organization that uh, didn't have access to Cherwell back when you were still using Cherwell. Obviously, the records won't be in the database. So that's a video you'll want to check out if you're interested in that. That's on the channel. Um, and I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. I also want to remind you all that every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I host what I call the Cortex Users Group, which is exactly what it sounds like, users of Cortex. But not just users. Anyone who's interested in learning more about Cortex is welcome to join. You can find the link down in the video description to get an invite to that as well. So, like I said, this is the second of two major features. There have been a few bonus features as well. You can see those on the channel as well. Um, but this is feature two. Feature three, I'll show hopefully in next week's video. And that'll have something to do with external data connections, external business objects, that sort of thing. So in today's video, I want to show you all about one steps. Now, one caveat with one steps. The word one step is actually a trademark. It was trademarked by Cherwell, and I assume that trademark is now owned by Avanti as part of the acquisition. So I'm not going to use the word one steps anywhere in Cortex. And technically, it should be one step actions if I were following the rules of trademark usage. But anyway, I'm going to stay away from that. I'm not going to call it one steps. I'm going to call them actions. So you'll see the terminology actions around Cortex in the demo. So let's switch over to that demo. So I've actually gone right to what a one step will look like in Cortex. And actually, let me take a step back and say and talk about why you would even want to see one steps in Cortex. So Cortex is still just a read-only platform. We're not going to open up the ability to update data, write data. That introduces a whole level of complexity that we're not ready to deal with. And honestly, that's kind of a separate set of use cases that we're not that the Cortex platform wasn't designed for. We're still focused on the historical data access aspect of what you all are going through. How do you keep access to your Cherwell data after you've moved off of Cherwell? So Cortex is very much still filling that void, still solving that problem. And we don't want to distract from that. We want to make sure that it works extremely well for that purpose, and get that as far as it needs to go. There are still a few things that we're working on that to make that experience even better and fill in some of the edge cases that are unique to some of your organizations. A lot of what we're working on now is feedback from customers, and that's actually where this came from. This was an ask from a customer, or I don't remember if it was a customer or just someone I was having a conversation with. But the question was basically, well, can I see my one steps that I had in Cherwell? And I dug a little bit deeper. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do that. I just have to write the code for it. But I want to make sure that I solve the problem that you're looking for, and actually build something that works for you. And the use case is this. Let's say, it's 2-3 years from now. You've moved off of Cherwell. You're not using Cherwell anymore. At that point, Cherwell licenses will have expired. You're on your new system and you've implemented uh, everything that you thought you were going to need. And maybe you've made some changes along the way, um, but you've built the perfect system for exactly how you plan to work for the next 5 or 10 years, right? Uh, but at that point in time, maybe one of two things happen. The first thing that might happen is as you're looking at historical data and being asked about it, maybe for an audit, maybe for just historical reference, um, you start to wonder, well, what was the process that this particular incident, change, problem, whatever, went through? What were our steps back then? Um, sure, maybe you could go back to documentation, but it would be a lot easier if we could just look at what was in the system and see what it did. So in that case, you'd pull up Cortex and look at exactly how your one steps were implemented when you were using Cherwell. The second situation is basically this. Everybody has to do a new implementation in a new system right now, right? If you had decided that this is the time for us to do a new implementation in a new system, you could allocate all the budget that you need to do whatever implementation uh, you had to do, move everything over. But since everybody is kind of forced to do a new implementation, maybe you haven't budgeted the entire implementation, or maybe you're just going to start with the core business processes just for right now. Whatever your reasons being, but maybe there's a plan to go back in a few years and see if, maybe that really was something valuable that we want to pull from Cherwell into a new tool. And not right now because we don't quite have the time. I know that's something that a lot of organizations are dealing with right now. They just have so much going on that they really don't have the mental space to do much in the way of a new implementation. And that's even why some organizations are only just starting to do um, calls for proposals and evaluations of new systems, that sort of thing, just because they were so totally taken by surprise by the end of life announcement, right? So over the next 2 years, it's totally going to be a rush. So maybe you do what you can, and then later on you can go back and add in those processes that you didn't get to the first time around, and you'd like to have a reference of what you were doing in Cherwell. So we're already 8 minutes in, and I've just finished talking about the justification for the feature. Let's actually get to the demo. So again, here's what I've built for one steps. Again, it doesn't actually run the one step. It doesn't write any data. This is just showing the structure of the one step. Um, it's divided into pre-steps, steps, and post-steps. Most one steps will only have steps. The pre-steps and the post-steps, you'll know if you're using them, if you built the one step. But for the most part, you can just pay attention to the steps part. And this particular one step I like using to demo because it actually has a lot going on, and it uses a lot of different one-step step types. So it starts off with the decide between multiple cases. I can't speak today. Decide between multiple cases, and here are the cases. So we have the first case here, second case, third case, which is actually empty. This is something that Cherwell let you do. You could kind of create an empty third case, or not third case, like just an empty case, um, and you didn't have to go and remove it. It was still considered valid as long as there was no expression and no steps. It didn't really matter. This would never evaluate to true and try to execute any of the steps anyway. So you're good there. And then the default case, or the otherwise case. I called it otherwise here. I forget what Cherwell calls it, but basically, if none of these cases match, what does it do? So in this case, it's an escalate to level 2 and 3. the Cherwell content team, when they were building out this out of the box one step, combined kind of those two operations into a single one step. Um, and basically it's, and you can see this is incomplete. I'm showing this demo, but you can't actually see it on the demo site quite yet because it's not quite done. There's still a few pieces that we haven't quite worked out the kinks in. One of which is showing the actual expression, but we do have the description of the expression. So uh, the first case is if escalations have already been made. And you can't escalate if it's already been escalated. Okay, cool. Next one is escalate to level 3. Otherwise, basically we escalate to level 2. And each one of these bold, big bits of text are um, the individual steps. So these would be the individual boxes in the one-step visual editor. Um, yeah, and if you expand them, well, let's start with not that one. Let's start with the pop-up. Escalations have already been made. So this is just a pop-up and it shows that text. This is pulled from an expression, so expressions are being evaluated. Um, they're evaluated in such a way that they don't have to know what the particular data is from the record that the one step would be running on, because obviously we're not running the one step. Um, so in some cases there might be um, missing pieces or placeholders, or like this would be a field, whatever this field is. So a good example is, well, save and refresh are both commands, but like create child business object. Um, we can see uh, in this case these are basically hard coded. I don't think it uses a field for any of these, um, but you can see that each of these types are implemented in a way that kind of makes sense for the type that it is. And that's actually one of the things that caused us to be a little bit slow as we're implementing these, is making sure that we present something that makes sense for the step type. So in the case of the pop-up, I figured just the pop-up text is sufficient, even though it doesn't really look like much. Um, Similarly, for execute command, I think this is in Cherwell, you get just like a select box for what command do you want to execute. So we're just showing the commands that would get executed. Um, I am going to go back to this update stored value one here, and you'll notice that there's this awful uh, gibberish. This is raw RTF, and this is something that Cherwell made use of in quite a few places, um, kind of internally. And that's one thing that we're in the process of kind of decoding in as minimal a way as possible, but enough that it'll still become useful. So one thing we've pulled out is there's actually a prompt buried in here. Um, so the description is prompt for third level escalation details. And what it really does is updates a stored value called third level escalation. And the value is this rich text that also gets part of its value from a prompt. I think in this case, it's all of its value, but it gets it from a prompt. So that's one thing that we're trying to figure out, the best way to present, uh, hey, this is a prompt, or in this case, this is rich text. It's tokenized. It gets some pieces of its value from other places, and especially when there are things like prompts or expressions or things like that. Um, that's one of the things that we're trying to figure out the best way to present that to you all, because you can go pretty deep with this stuff. You can have a one step that uses an expression, that uses a prompt, that uses another expression, and you can go really deep, and we want to make sure that we're presenting it in a way that um, makes sense and is actually helpful, as opposed to just a wall of text, which is, I mean, this is a wall of text here, but even like just showing the name of the prompt isn't particularly helpful because in the case of a prompt, it is just a prompt. It's give me a value. But in the case of an expression, just showing the name of the expression, probably not going to be all that helpful. So still got a little bit of work to go on that. Um, and similarly, so we've got the create child business object. Again, these tokens can get pretty tricky as far as like where they're coming from. So in this case, third level escalation details, it actually refers to this stored value in kind of a roundabout sort of way. So that's something we're still working on presenting that in the best way possible. We've got another pop-up, update BizOb. Um, that's pretty simple. That's essentially what it looks like. This is the field on the business object, and this is the value. That's a simple version. That's how it's supposed to look. Um, yeah, and this will work for any one step. So we've added this actions tab on the sidebar, and it looks similar to the saved searches screen. Um, and for a very simple one, you can look at create incident, which is basically just it takes an incident business object and sets some fields. I get the feeling there's some information missing there, but maybe that's true. Maybe it literally does just set service category and subcategory to empty strings. Um, I'm not really sure. Um, this this whole going down the one step rabbit hole definitely has a lot of complexity involved in it, um, and yeah, it ended up being a little trickier than I expected it to be. So that's why it's taking a little bit longer. Um, I do I am curious for feedback, and this is how you can help steer the direction that Cortex is going. If there's something specific that you want to see from the one steps, that's less general than just how were they built, but you know I really want to see this type of step. I really want to see how the expressions were used in the steps. Something specific that can help guide us. Either make sure that we present the right information, or present it in a way that makes sense and is easy to consume. One thing I don't want to do necessarily right off the bat is kind of the visual graph oriented thing that Cherwell provided. It's good for building one steps, but it gets really complicated really quickly, especially if all I'm doing is presenting the one step. So if this list and expanding panel style is sufficient, then I really want to stick with that and show what I need to on each one of those expanding panels. Um, but hopefully that works for everybody. Um, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Leave them in the comments down below. Shoot me an email. There's information in the description on how to set some time on my calendar. So, if you want to show off some of the one steps that you have in your system, I'm more than happy to look at them and see what we can do for that. And I'm also really curious about the sorts of one steps that you have built. Like I said, specific types of step types that you use all over the place, or make frequent use of. Um, Other things that you want to see. And if you have examples and are willing to share them, or at least want to do a screen share, I'm more than happy to do that. I'd love to do that. Um, I'm always happy to receive, structure only ZARs. I can learn a lot about how systems are put together from those. And of course, the one steps come in structure only ZARs. Structure and lookup are even better. I don't expect to get whole system backups from anyone, because you want to keep control of your data. Um, but if you want to show off how a one step worked and that sort of thing, we can certainly arrange a call to do that. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. and I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.